I never thought I'd be the one to complicate our perfect family dynamic. But life has a way of testing your moral compass when you least expect it. My name is Charlotte, and at 32, I became a stepmother to a 23-year-old. Not exactly what I imagined when I first met Daniel at my art gallery in Seattle. He was charming, successful, and his passion for architecture matched my love for art. The rain was pouring that day, typical Seattle weather, when he walked in to discuss displaying his firm's designs. I remember thinking how his gray temples made him look distinguished, worldly. How his eyes lit up when he talked about his work. How he mentioned his son so casually, I almost missed it. Alex is studying graphic design, he said, examining a modern sculpture. I nodded, not realizing how that name would later keep me awake at night. Daniel and I had a whirlwind romance. Fancy restaurants, weekend trips to Vancouver, long conversations about art and architecture. He was different from the pretentious gallery owners and struggling artists I usually dated. Stable. Mature. Sure of himself. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. That's when he suggested I meet Alex. He's still dealing with his mother's death, Daniel explained. But he's a good kid. You'll like him. I prepared myself for a sullen college student, maybe some attitude. What I wasn't prepared for was Alex himself. Tall, with his father's strong features but softer somehow. An artist's sensitivity in his eyes. He was polite, if a bit reserved. "Welcome to the family," he said, and I heard the slight tremor in his voice. The first few months were about finding our rhythm. I tried not to overstep, to be more friend than mother. It helped that we shared similar interests. Alex would show me his design projects. I'd give him feedback, share stories from the gallery. We'd discuss indie bands that Daniel had never heard of. Sometimes we'd all have dinner together, and it felt right. Like we were healing something broken in this house. The photographs of Alex's mother still hung on the walls. I never suggested taking them down. This was her home first, and I respected that. But slowly, I started adding my own touches. Modern art pieces in the living room. Fresh flowers in the kitchen. A record player in the den, where Alex and I would sometimes listen to vinyl. Daniel was always working late, but he seemed happy we got along. "You've brought life back to this place," he'd say, kissing my cheek. I didn't notice when things started to shift. Maybe it was during those late-night conversations about art. When Daniel was away at conferences, and the house felt too quiet. Alex and I would talk for hours about everything and nothing. His dreams of starting his own design firm. My regrets about selling out to commercial galleries. The way we both felt most alive when creating something new. I told him. It was normal, this connection. We were family now, after all. But then came the moments I couldn't explain away. The way my heart would skip when I heard his key in the door. How I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't aware. The electricity when our hands would accidentally touch passing coffee cups. I started wearing more makeup, even on casual days. Caught myself wondering what he thought of my outfits. Hated myself for wondering. One rainy Saturday, Daniel was in Chicago for a big project. Alex suggested we watch some obscure French film he'd been talking about. "You'll love it," he said. "Dad would hate it." We sat on opposite ends of the couch, but the space between us felt charged. The film was beautiful, all longing glances and unspoken desires. I was acutely aware of every shift in his position. Every small laugh or thoughtful hum. When he turned to explain a scene, his face illuminated by the TV's glow. I saw something in his eyes that terrified me, because I recognized it from my own reflection. That night, I lay awake beside Daniel's empty side of the bed, thinking about how wrong this was. How I needed to stop whatever was happening before it started. But the next morning, Alex was in the kitchen making coffee. He bought my favorite pastries from the French bakery downtown. "Thought you might need breakfast," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. And just like that, we were back in dangerous territory. I threw myself into being the perfect wife. Organized dinner parties for Daniel's clients. Redecorated his office at home. Anything to focus on my marriage, my commitment. But Alex was always there, on the periphery of my vision. His presence like a shadow I couldn't shake. We developed an unspoken language of avoidance. Never being alone together too long. Keeping conversations light, impersonal. But sometimes, in unguarded moments. When he'd reach past me for a book, his scent lingering. Or when we'd both laugh at some private joke during family dinner. The attraction would flare up like a physical force. Daniel remained oblivious, busy with his newest project. A massive development downtown that kept him at the office until late. "You two keep each other company," he'd say, kissing me goodbye. Not knowing how those words would echo in my mind. One evening, I was working late in my home office. Going through gallery invoices, trying to stay busy. I heard Alex come home, his footsteps in the hallway. He paused outside my door, and I held my breath. After what felt like eternity, he walked past. But the moment stayed with me, heavy with possibility. I started taking longer routes to move through the house. Avoiding the studio where he worked on his designs. Making sure doors stayed open when we had to talk. But in a house this size, with Daniel gone so much. Moments were inevitable. Like the time we both reached for the same coffee mug. Our fingers brew. Shing, sending electricity up my arm. Or when he helped me hang a new painting in the living room. His body close behind mine as I adjusted the frame. The worst part was the guilt. It ate at me during quiet moments. When Daniel would proudly show off Alex's latest work. My son, the artist, he'd beam, and my heart would crack. I thought about leaving more than once. Making up some excuse about missing my old life. But the thought of hurting Daniel was unbearable. And if I was honest, the thought of leaving Alex was worse. So I stayed, walking this tightrope of propriety. Pretending not to notice the tension building day by day. Until the night of the thunderstorm. When everything we'd been carefully avoiding came to a head. Daniel was supposed to be home, but his flight was delayed. The power went out just as darkness fell. I was in the kitchen, searching for candles. When Alex appeared in the doorway, flashlight in hand. "Need help?" he asked, and his voice was too soft. Too intimate in the darkness. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He moved closer, the flashlight beam dancing across the walls. We found candles in a drawer, lined them up on the counter. The storm raged outside, but in the kitchen. Time seemed to stop, suspended in candlelight. "We should talk about this," he said finally. And I knew exactly what he meant. But talking would make it real. Would give power to this thing we'd been denying. "Alex," I started, but my voice shook. He stepped closer, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. The same war I'd been fighting with myself. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. And for a moment, I forgot everything else. Forgot I was his stepmother. Forgot about Daniel. forgot about right and wrong. We stood there, breathing the same air. The candles flickering between us. Everything we couldn't say filling the silence. His hand reached up, almost touching my face. And that's when we heard it, a key in the front door. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Daniel's voice called out from the hallway. "Hello? Anyone home?" Flight got in early. Just like that, the spell was broken. Alex disappeared upstairs before his father reached the kitchen. And I pasted on a smile, greeting my husband with shaking hands. That night marked a change in our careful dance. The almost kiss hung between us like a physical thing, making every interaction charged with what could have been. I started spending more time at the gallery, coming home late after I knew Alex would be in his room. But living under the same roof, avoidance was impossible. Especially when Daniel insisted on family dinners. "We barely see each other anymore," he complained. If only he knew why. One morning, I overheard Alex on the phone, discussing a job offer in Portland. My heart stopped, then started racing. Relief and devastation warred in my chest. This was the solution we needed. The escape route. We'd been too weak to take. But the thought of him leaving felt like physical pain. That evening, I found myself in the kitchen again. Alex was there, making coffee. The same scene we'd played out countless times before. But this time felt different. Final somehow. "When were you going to tell us about Portland?" I asked. He didn't turn around, his shoulders tense. "I haven't decided yet." "You should take it." The words hurt to say, but they were necessary. He turned then, his eyes meeting mine. "Is that what you want?" "No," I wanted to say. "I want impossible things. I want to not be your stepmother. I want to have met you first. I want to not love your father." Instead, I said, "It's what needs to happen." He nodded slowly, understanding everything I wasn't saying. "We can't keep doing this," he agreed. "Pretending everything's normal. Living with what almost happened." The coffee maker beeped, making us both jump. "I'll miss you," he said softly. And those 3 words held everything we could never be. I left the kitchen before I could say something we'd regret. That night, I lay awake thinking about choices. About parallel universes where things were different. Where I met Alex first, at some gallery opening. Where we were just 2 people falling in love. But that wasn't our reality. Our reality was this house, these roles we'd chosen. The good man sleeping beside me. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Alex accepted the Portland job. Daniel was thrilled, proud of his son's success. Planned a big farewell dinner. Invited all our friends and family. I watched Alex accept congratulations. Saw him play the part of the excited young professional. Only I noticed the sadness in his eyes. The way he avoided looking at me directly. The night before he left, we had one last family dinner. Daniel ordered from Alex's favorite Italian place. Opened an expensive bottle of wine. Toasted to new beginnings. If he noticed the tension in the room. The way his wife and son barely spoke. He didn't show it. After dinner, Alex went to finish packing. I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up. Trying to keep my hands busy. My mind off tomorrow's goodbye. Later, I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Knew it was Alex, taking one last look around. I stayed where I was, gripping the counter. Fighting the urge to go to him. To say all the things we'd left unsaid. The footsteps paused outside the kitchen. My heart hammered in my chest. Please go, I thought. Please stay. After what felt like forever, the footsteps continued. I heard the front door open and close softly. And just like that, he was gone. I allowed myself one moment of weakness. One silent tear for what could never be. Then I wiped my eyes, straightened my shoulders, and went upstairs to my husband. To the life I'd chosen. The life I would choose again. Because sometimes love means walking away. Sometimes doing the right thing hurts more than doing the wrong one. But that's what makes it right. The next morning, I helped Daniel load Alex's car. Watched them hug goodbye. Accepted my own awkward farewell embrace. And stood on the porch as he drove away. Toward Portland, toward his future. Away from this house of almost and what if. Daniel squeezed my hand as the car disappeared. He'll be back to visit, he said cheerfully. I smiled and nodded, knowing things would never be the same. That some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Inside, I started cleaning Alex's room. Boxing up the things he'd left behind. Found a sketch he'd done of me one evening. Me laughing at something, unaware of being watched. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I tucked it into a book in my office. A reminder of what we'd avoided. What we'd sacrificed for love of a different kind. For family, for loyalty, for doing what's right. The house felt emptier without him. Quieter in a way it hadn't been before. But also lighter somehow. Like a storm had passed without breaking. Leaving the air clear and clean. Daniel and I settled into a new routine. More dinners out, just the two of us. Weekend trips to art galleries in Vancouver. Rediscovering why we fell in love in the first place. And if sometimes, late at night, I thought about candlelight and almost kisses. About artistic hands and understanding eyes. Well, that was my secret to keep. Some loves aren't meant to be explored. Some stories are better left unfinished. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. No matter how tempting the other side looks. That's what I tell myself on quiet evenings. When the rain falls against the windows. And memories feel too close for comfort. That's what I'll keep telling myself. Until I believe it completely. 6 months passed like a dream. Life settled into a new normal without Alex. Daniel and I grew closer, if anything. Maybe because the guilt made me try harder. To be the perfect wife, the perfect partner. He'd call from Portland occasionally. Always when he knew his father would be home. Brief conversations about work, about life. Carefully casual, determinately normal. I'd listen from the other room. Pretending to read, but catching every word. His voice sounded different, more mature somehow. Or maybe that was just what I needed to believe. One rainy Sunday, Daniel came home excited. A new project in Portland needed his expertise. We should visit Alex while we're there, he said. My heart stopped, then raced. But I smiled and nodded, the perfect supportive wife. That would be nice, I lied. We booked flights for the following weekend. I spent hours choosing what to pack. Hating myself for caring so much. The Portland air was crisp and clean. Different from Seattle's heavy rain. Alex met us at a trendy restaurant downtown. Looking more polished, more confident. Success suited him. He hugged his father warmly. Gave me a brief, proper embrace. Everything a stepson should be. We ordered wine, shared appetizers. Talked about safe topics. His new job, his apartment, the Portland art scene. But underneath the pleasant conversation, I felt the current of unspoken words. Saw how carefully he avoided direct eye contact. Daniel, oblivious, did most of the talking. Proud father sharing stories about his latest projects. I watched Alex's hands as he gestured. Remembered how they almost touched my face that night. Forced myself to look away. Focus on my untouched food. After dinner, Alex insisted on showing Daniel his office. Charlotte can get settled at the hotel, he said. His first time saying my name all evening. It hung in the air between us. I took the escape route gratefully. Spent the evening in the hotel bar. Drinking overpriced wine. Trying not to think about what-ifs. The next day was filled with business meetings. Daniel busy with his clients. I wandered the Portland Art Museum alone. Until I turned a corner and there was Alex. Standing in front of a modern sculpture. Like a scene from someone else's life. I thought I might find you here, he said. Not turning around. My heart hammered against my ribs. We shouldn't, I started. I know, he cut me off. I just wanted to see you once. Without him watching. Without pretending. I moved to stand beside him. Careful not to let our arms touch. We stared at the sculpture in silence. Are you happy? I finally asked. Getting there, he answered. You? I'm trying. More silence, heavy with meaning. I drew you again, he admitted. From memory this time. Alex. I know. He finally turned to look at me. I just needed to say it once. What we never said before. Please don't, I whispered. But he continued anyway. In another life, he said softly. We would have been amazing. I closed my eyes against the truth of it. Against the future we couldn't have. When I opened them, he was gone. Just the echo of his words remaining. That evening, at another dinner, I watched him charm his father's clients. Saw the man he was becoming. Strong, confident, whole. And I knew we'd made the right choice. Some loves are meant to stay unspoken. Some feelings better left in the dark. We flew back to Seattle the next day. Life resumed its normal rhythm. Daniel talked about how well Alex was doing. How proud he was of his son. I smiled and agreed and kept my secrets. Months turned into a year. Alex's calls became less frequent. More professional, more distant. He started dating someone. A gallery owner he met through work. I told myself I was happy for him. And mostly, I was. Because that's what love is sometimes. Wanting someone else's happiness more than your own. Daniel and I renewed our vows that summer. A small ceremony in our backyard. Alex came home for it, brought his girlfriend. Watched me promise forever to his father. Later, during the reception, we shared one dance, as family should. You look beautiful, he said politely. And if his hand trembled slightly on my waist. Well, that was our last secret to keep. Time has a way of healing what it can. Of smoothing rough edges into something manageable. The memories don't hurt as much now. They've taken on the soft focus of might-have-beens. I still have his sketch, hidden away. A reminder of choices made and kept. Of roads not taken, and why. Daniel and I are happy, truly. We've built a good life together. And if sometimes, on rainy nights, I think about candlelight and almost kisses. About the cost of doing the right thing. Well, that's between me and the darkness. Some stories don't need endings. Some loves are better left as questions. Beautiful in their impossibility. Perfect because they never were. End.